The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is an action game that was developed by Stormfront Studios, published by EA Games, and released on the PS2, Xbox and Gamecube in October of 2002. At time of release, this title was received well by most critics, with most scores landing between 7 and 8 out of 10, and also sold incredibly well, selling close to 4 million copies in total. Although the game is named after the Two Towers, it does actually cover the events of the Fellowship of the Ring as well, as the studio didn't get the chance to make a game based on the first movie, which I assume was due to licensing. Now, when I say that this game covers the events of the first two movies, that's not 100% accurate, as the story plays more like the developers were saying, "Hey, do you remember this action scene?" Okay, let's move on. Yes, the game does feature cutscenes and FMV from the movie to try and link everything together, but the way in which it's chopped up and stitched together means that if you're a fan of the movies, you'll be able to follow things when it jumps over giant parts of the plot. However, if you're looking for a solid retelling of this narrative in video game form, then this isn't it.
Frodo carries the fate of us all. We must defend him.
Even though it does drop the ball a bit from a storytelling perspective, it does make up for it with its hack and slash gameplay. Here's how it breaks down. You can play each mission as either Aragorn, Legolas or Gimli, and each character has a light attack, a heavy attack, a kick and a ranged attack. Along with this, you also have the ability to parry, which comes into play quite a lot. All of these standard things you'd expect from a beat-em-up are here. You walk through an area based on an action scene from the movie, as the game throws a few enemies at you here and there, or you hold down a specific spot, and on occasion a boss character will show up to test you a little more. There are plenty of good things going on here. The combat does offer some depth with a good selection of unlockable combos and upgrades. Each playable character does have subtle differences to them to add to the replay value, and the action for the most part is enjoyable. As I said, there are plenty of good things going on here, but the gameplay does stumble in some parts. The feeling I get from playing this game is that the developers put together a really cool combat system that encourages variety in order to gain more XP, but it's almost as if the lack of time they had didn't allow them to craft missions that would get the full use out of it. On a regular basis, you will find yourself surrounded by enemies, and the action isn't built to handle more than 1 or 2 enemies at a time. Yes, it is possible to block attacks, but you can easily find yourself stuck in a loop of being knocked down to the ground or just blocking forever with no way to escape. This doesn't creep up often enough to ruin the game, but it can lead you down a path of playing cheaply and spamming specific attacks just to make it through some sections, and considering that the missions don't have checkpoints and some of them are set to a timer, you can see why it would lead to some frustrating moments. Similar comments could be applied to the boss battles, as I found my best strategy for most of them was to rely heavily on very specific attack patterns, because trying to aim for a high score would just leave me more vulnerable. So while I'm not saying that I didn't have a good time working my way through the big set pieces of these two films, most of the time that I saw the game over screen, it felt less like poor decision making on my part and more like I was just unlucky with how aggressive the enemy AI decided to be. Make no mistake, this is still one of the best video game adaptations of Tolkien's work. The action is non-stop, keeps you on your toes, and it never gets boring, but you should go into this knowing that some missions are just a case of trial and error. Another positive for me is the recreation of the locations from the movie. There's an argument to say that all of the areas are very linear and limited in size and scope, but when asking myself the question, does this look like the scene from the film, the answer is yes. I don't have any real gripes with the visuals overall, to be honest. I wouldn't say that the game is impressive to look at, more along the lines of, this looks good for 2002. The animation of all the sword swinging and arrow shooting is solid, the detail to the character models looks great from a distance and slightly less great up close, but the environments are crisp, featuring some surprisingly good texture work. As it's a movie tie-in, they do borrow both the voice work and soundtrack from the movie. The soundtrack sounds as great as it ever did, and really beefs up the epic feel to some of the missions. Although some lines of dialogue were ripped straight from the film, others were clearly recorded just for the game, and they tend to stand out as there is a definite drop in quality.
All Isengard is emptied. It is an army bred for one purpose, to destroy the world of men. The Dark Lord draws near.
I feel like the best way to summarise The Two Towers is to say that it's a good action game that serves as a basis for a great one. In my opinion, the sequel that would release a year later is superior in every way and even adds co-op, but that doesn't mean that this game doesn't hold any value. It's clear that a lot of thought went into how the combat should feel, and the majority of the time, it's exactly the kind of hectic and relentless action you'd want out of a game like this. It does suffer from some sharp difficulty curves at times, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments where I wanted to stop playing. But my love for the movies is what kept me playing till the end, and that's who this game is made for, the fans. It doesn't get everything right, but it does nail the feel of the movies and allows you to take part in some of its most memorable scenes in a way that feels authentic to the material it is based on.